losing party is a little under 100 or 200,000. They recount automatically. So it has nothing to do with Al Gore. He didn't go to court. The state itself the state went to court and simply said, we have a problem here, but we have to do a recount and so on. Likely because of what they call hanging charts. In other words, people press their button and so on, press the ballot, and then the little piece of paper that they call it the chart that should have fallen off. In some cases, it did not fall off. And the dispute was whether people really intended to vote this way or vote that way. So it was one of those kind of things. And those are the kind of things Trump keeps bringing up. There's no question that if he can call for probably an upgrade of the system and so on, they can do that. But he's done a lot of damage to what is perhaps the most exemplary democracy. And as you see, as the program goes on, I still have issues, on race, on class, on immigration, and so on and so forth. But by and large, it is the most open society that we've seen so far. Most countries don't go that far.
I think we need to go to the United States now to have the view of Dr. Ewa, who is the chairman, African Political Action Committee. We're talking about, on one side, the electoral process in the United States. But of interest to me is how the eventual president will emerge with the allocation of votes. If you attain 320, I think you would have gone home far and dry. But 270. You go to an electoral college or something, how it plays out. Because if you hit the 300 plus, you would have been distant. But once the opponent makes 270, I think they go to the electoral college to this thing. And you get elected and something. So both of them are targeting something. So like what obtains in Nigeria, where we have the votes running in millions, the numerical majority comes out as the winner. But here we're talking about the electoral votes based on the key areas. So what is your view there? How do we come about this and how is it going to pan out?
Good morning, fellow Nigerians. I think I'm very pleased that all of the things that you've said have been very, very instrumental in getting people to understand what goes on in the United States. While they determine the popularity vote as an instrument leading you to become the president of the United States, the Electoral College is one of the most distinguished avenues for which, no matter what happens, it dictates to all of us, based upon the majority of the Electoral College numbers from each state, you will win the presidency by having 270 plus votes. As it is today, I would like to inform all of you that I think, based upon what we have seen and what is going to be pronounced today, in fact, I was getting ready to come to the to air when they announced that Moody's Electoral College map, which is the most accurate predictor of the presidency, has given Hillary Clinton up to 332 votes, while Donald Trump is going to have approximately 206. Also, it is determined that if Clinton wins Florida, just Florida only, given the electoral map, she is also going to be the president. And let me give you this information that came out last night. Approximately 53% of those who have pre-registered, pre-voted, Clinton has that in her bag, which means 53% of those who have already voted in Florida, which is the key voting state that would propel her to the presidency, Clinton is leading there by 53% of the registered voters. Second, she is also leading the popular vote for those who have already voted, 48 to 40%. So that if you put all of these things together based upon the Electoral College, as predicted by Moody's Electoral College map, it appears that Clinton is on her way to becoming the next president of the United States.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Ewa. But then let's look at the swing states in these elections. You've just mentioned Florida as one of them. What are the other swing states that we are looking at? And also you talked about, Moody also. I saw that report quite early as 5 a.m. this morning. And Moody saying that she's going to win by a landslide victory. But then the polls that we see, ABC is already saying, of course, that Donald Trump is ahead. CNN poll still leaves it at 4 points, 4-point lead for Hillary Clinton. But then, what's merging from your perspective are we going to see? Because when we saw Barack Obama and Romney, we saw, of course, McCain and Barack Obama, we saw a 2.1 lead. It was only Clinton, Bush that we saw a 5.1 lead when they had that election. What is the margin that we might see in this election, and what are the swing states that we're looking at?
For the spring state, you have Virginia, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Iowa, and Florida. If you look at the general polling that has come out for the past 1 month, and I can assure you that by the end of the voting period, November the 8th and November the 9th, we will be having an approximate 5 to 6% for Clinton as the overall winner, because just like what we had with the President Obama, they were calling it very, very close. When the votes were counted, it was winning by 5%. I think right now, the average polling has given Clinton, even though yesterday's ABC News poll says, what's his name? Trump is leading by 1%. This is just an outlier, and I don't think it's going to hold. But you can watch that from now till the voting period on November the 8th. I think Clinton will win by between 5 to 6% of the popular vote.
And thank Dr. Ewa there. Let's come back to the studio. You've had the submission of Dr. Ewa, who is right there, following trends. Let's begin with the former Permanent Secretary, Ambassador Bulus. What is your take on this?
Well, it is generally the trend in America that the last week of the electoral campaign in a presidential election comes up with surprises. And this is no different. But as to the trend with the polls going either way, first let me say that this election is unlike any other election that I have followed in the United States in the last 36 years. Either way you look at it, neither Clinton nor Trump represents that average presidential candidate that the two parties that we know often boast of. So there's something unique about both of them. But generally then, if you look at Donald Trump, he is the master of the hyperbole, a guy who likes to use the media to serve his own purpose. When the media is on his side, it is a darling to him. But when the media also is against Trump, like we saw recently, he will bash and bash the media. So he knows how to manipulate the media. And he's made a good fortune, actually, through the media. He uses, to start with even, Trump became a candidate because he had free media. Others had to pay, but he just emerged through comments that you would not expect of a man of his stature. But he is where he is.
The common man's language.
Whatever it is. But at the end of the day, and I heard what Dr. Ewa said, which is very true, we cannot rely simply on what the polls are saying. Already people have cast their ballots. Some are going to cast on Tuesday, November the 8th. And until the results are finally in, we can never say. One thing is sure, one of the two will be the next president of the United States. And I know later in the program, we'll be looking at the implication for Nigeria and Africa. So simply here, I would say we must not rush to judge, and let us leave that to the Almighty, who already knows the result before the ballot is cast.
Professor Wazirike, Dr. Ewa said Clinton is leading in Florida with 53%, already ballot cast. And in the swing states, is already ahead by 6%. Are you saying that the latest scandal, the email scandal, is not having any effect?
Yeah, that's why I was trying to be cautious, and I think Ambassador has already made some of the key points. As you know very well, I was a university professor there for several years, and we've been through this election cycle several times, at least since the Ronald Reagan era in the 70s. And one of the things that you need to take to heart is that it's never over until it is over. It's a very popular saying, because October is always full of surprises. And what we're having here is the first post-Cold War election when there is really the big elephant is not in the room. The big elephant, of course, is the whole nuclear rivalry with some major powers. It's not an issue this time. Normally it is. So that people have the luxury of going left and right. And one of the frightening things is that you have somebody like a temperamental person like Trump, potentially with his hands on the nuclear trigger. That ought to keep people restless. And from Putin in Russia to Chinese experts to analysts all over the world, people are really worrying. What will happen if this man is carrying that nuclear suitcase around? If you are not him, what will he do? Then you have Mrs. Clinton, who basically hasn't handled these emails very well at all. Basically, there is an issue there. It's not a huge issue in the sense that so far nothing burning has actually, but she needs to be a lot more careful. So part of it is that as Americans go to the polls, they're really wondering which of these two characters can keep them safe and so on. But there's no question that Trump is by far, from an international standard, from a Nigerian perspective, from an African perspective, from any other perspective, one of the most frightening figures to ever emerge on the American political landscape since Joe McCarthy and the anti-communist hysteria.
Even the Republicans acknowledge that.
Even the Republicans acknowledge. Oh, they are perplexed. They just can't vote for Mrs. Clinton. Doesn't mean they want to vote for they're going to hold their nose as they vote. So those are some of the issues, because depending on what comes up in the next few days, there are people hunting up for all kinds of things on Trump. There are all kinds of issues with the email. I think the email... Was that?
For Trump, it's tax evasion.
The tax evasion. But the fact that Trump has come across as a Teflon candidate. Things that would normally sink any other person seem to bounce off him. The question of 12 women, the whole question of not paying taxes at all, those are red button issues.
Not even declaring.
Not even declaring that says he's smart to have avoided taxes. That's a crime, and so on. So there are several issues he's gotten away with. So people think of him as an unconventional character. Oh, it doesn't really matter, and so on. But remember that in terms of the demographics you mentioned before, the breakdown between Republicans and, the core members will always vote for the person.
Yeah.
Just because they hate the other party so much, they cannot go the other way. But Democrats have the edge. 49% of registered voters claim to be Democrats. 38% claim to be Republicans. So it's always the swing voters and those swing states that are the issue. And the swing voters are like about 15%. And generally elections are won by 4 points, 2 points, even 1 point and so on. So we need to be careful in terms of projecting who will win. I think that Mrs. Clinton might prevail, but it depends on what has happened between our weekends.
All right, thank you very much, Prof. Let's get to Dr. Ewa. Dr. Ewa, now let's begin to break it down, the issues in this election. Both candidates really seem to differ on everything, from how they intend to go about taxes, from how they intend to go about immigration, foreign policy, healthcare. The Obama healthcare was an issue that has been on the front burner for the last 2 days on how it has failed. And she has said that Hillary Clinton says she believes in it and would continue after President Barack Obama. The war in Iraq, Syria, childcare, these are issues that both candidates differ totally. But how would this impact on the election? How would the views of both candidates, or how they intend to make the economy better, how would this affect the way that people are going to vote? First of all, let's begin with the economy, and of course, let's look at the issue of immigration.
Thank you very much. Let me say this. In terms of the voting pattern as the demographics as we have seen them, you will be seeing today that of those who have already voted and continue to vote relatively, in Florida, which is going to be the best way to judge this election, that 28% of Republican voters, remember what I'm saying, 28% of Republican voters have already crossed over to vote for Hillary Clinton. That's number one. Number two, you're talking about the economy. In all perspectives, as we have seen in many years, every time a president wins an election, there are three things that go with the individual. First of all, let's look at this presidential election. Because of Obama's popularity, that is an advantage for Clinton. Second, the economic condition of the country is very good. Third, the general political conditions of the country are also very, very favorable to the Democrats. And finally, look at gas prices. When you look at all of these things, these variables that determine electoral victory in this country, it appears that Clinton is on her way to becoming the next president. It is not very, it's very, very important for you to realize that Donald Trump's candidacy has been a unique one. He stands for nothing except some of the rhetoric he has used to kick out the other 16 presidential candidates. Unfortunately for him, he has more baggages than Clinton. As one of your guests has said, Clinton has not handled the email process very, very well. If somebody else came in to run for this presidency other than Donald Trump, the Democrats might have lost this election. But given the conditions as they are today, there are so many Republicans who are cross-voting. Can you imagine? Already there are approximately 21 million votes cast. And a majority of these are cast by Democrats. And when you add in the crossover votes of Republicans, it appears very, very clearly that in the next 6 days, Hillary Clinton is going to be the next president. We are not very, very, people don't even care about what this man says on a daily basis, because if you look at what he has said relative to public policy, nobody wants him in his corner. And therefore, if Clinton holds on without making any mistakes from now until November the 8th, we are going to have a new president, and that will be Hillary Clinton. Because of the economy, because of the gas prices, which are always very influential, because of the popularity of President Obama, and many of the Republicans also don't even want to be associated with Donald Trump because of his racist tendencies, which were predicated upon his father. And this is what I think we need to understand. The rhetoric he has put on for the presidency has helped him, but it's not enough for him to overtake Hillary Clinton.
Dr. Ewa, let's look at the issue of immigration and race. It's a major issue that is actually playing out in this election. Immigration, Hillary Clinton has said she would continue to see how she can harmonize the 11 million, immigrants that are not documented. Donald Trump has said he's going to put a plan in place to send them back, build a wall along with Mexico, which some Americans seem to differ, but not to forget that with the issues that America has with security, this is a major issue. Having people coming from Syria and other parts of the world into America, it's a major issue for Americans. How do you think this is going to play out?
Unfortunately, it's not going to happen. Constitutionally, it will not happen. And based upon what he has said relatively, I don't think he will have the nerve to tell Mexico, the president of Mexico, to pay for what he has been propagating. So we know that, even the Republicans know that, yes, his rhetoric on this particular issue is not going to work. I don't think the United States would allow anybody, even Congress. I think probably we might be having a new Senate held by the Democrats, And therefore, he has no chance. Even if he becomes the president, his immigration policy is not going to work. It will not be manifested, and it's not going to take place, given the conditions under which he has proposed all of this nonsense. I also want to let you know that more than 60 to 70% of Republicans already know that it is nonsense. It's not going to take place. Even if it does take place, I don't think the logistics of operation, the logistics of actually deporting 11 million people, which are mostly from Latin America and Mexico and the rest of them, no congressman from Mexico who is either in the state or in the federal is going to support that type of a move. So it is a mute issue at this particular point, and it's not going to happen, period.
All right, thank you, Dr. Ewa. We'll still come back to you, and as we come to the studio to feel the pulse of Ambassador and Professor Owazirike, because a lot of issues are coming up. Now, we'll look at the issues raised by Dr. Ewa along the benchmarks of the issues that are dominating the campaign: economy, defense, immigration, and all that. But one other area of interest is that of races. We see the place of blacks, Hispanics, women, and all that, coming up in an election of that nature with America over 200 years independent. What is your take here, Ambassador?
Well, my take first is that Donald Trump comes across as a closet racist, in the sense that he knows in the 21st century you cannot fly a flag and say, I belong to the extreme right of the right, such as the Ku Klux Klan is in the United States. But rather than come out, you hear Trump in the crowd pointing out, oh, that's an African American. He doesn't say that's an Italian American, that's an English American, but it is an African. African because you have a peculiar color to your race. That's Trump. And between him and Hillary, it's very, very clear during the debate. Clinton reminded Trump that years back, he was busy fighting a case in court for discriminating against his African-American workers. So if you look at the pattern, you can almost judge and say yes and conclude at the same time that here is a person with a history of issues to do with people of color associating with him. And on the other hand, Clinton has the history and pedigree of working for minorities. In fact, she more or less cut her career working for minorities. But I would venture at this point to say that whoever wins the election on November the 8th will take America in a new direction. New direction in the sense that the issues that you have enumerated, the economy, and even more of national security, that is an issue that tends to unite Americans. Once you invoke the national security of the United States, whether you are Democrat, you are Republican, or you are independent, they react the same way. And in this case, experience matters. We've heard on this panel this morning how there is nervousness in entrusting America's nuclear code to either Clinton or a Trump. Those who call Trump temperamental, we've seen his behavior. And we then wonder, with the code in his hand, he wakes up on a bad day. What will he do? Where will he take the world?
Well, right, Ambassador, still with you, because
yes.
We know that you are pressed for time.
Yes.
Let's look at where Africa falls in should any of them emerge.
Yeah.
Africa, Nigeria, what is our place? Looking at what both candidates are championing in this campaign, as it affects African Americans, as it affects certain policies that somebody has to say, well, Nigerians, you have to leave this country,
right,
you know, for one reason or the other. What, given your experience interacting, you know, in the turf of diplomacy?
I will say this with all sense of honesty, that following the election so far, Africa has not really been on the radar in the campaign. That's one thing we must bear in mind. Of the issues, and during the 3 presidential debates and 1 vice presidential debate, hardly did I hear a mention of Africa by the candidates in their responses and in the questions by the panelists. However, given that if Clinton wins, she was part of the Obama administration and she's a Democrat, we may see a measure of continuity. But if Trump wins, there will be, in fact, already he is preaching isolationism for the United States. He will retreat inward and deal with America's problems. And how then does that affect Nigeria and Africa? We must be prepared to deal with a number of issues. Take immigration. What if Trump follows through, were he to be elected, to say he's expelling the illegal immigrants on the country, in America? Some Nigerians will be affected. Second, they are going to be more stringent. They are going to be more stringent with their immigration laws. And third, the question of acquiring visa to visit the United States will also become more problematic. So looking ahead in the horizon, I see and I pray that it will be an administration that will be more sympathetic, will be more willing to engage. And for Nigeria, we've had a relatively good relationship under Obama. That's why I said chances are, if Clinton wins, there will be continuity. And of course, Clinton, as Secretary of State, visited Nigeria. We must not forget that. She was guest to the late Ojoma Adueke, and as a senator too, and in her interactions, I'm sure she boasts, both her husband and herself, of very good Nigerian friends in their corner.
All right, but just before we let you go, I'm just going to ask you this, Ambassador, and this is something that some school of thoughts have actually, been saying. I've also thought about it as a woman. Right. Is America really ready for a female president? Why? Because some people have said that no candidate has suffered the mudslings that she has suffered in any election. And also, they've also said that, is this something that would continue to follow her if she becomes a president? Is this something, because we've said, oh, she's tired, oh, she's weak, she cannot become, and all of that. Is this something we'll continue to see if she becomes a president?
Let's retreat a little bit to 2008, when Obama became the president of the United States. Up until then, the general belief and thinking was America was not ready for an African-American president. Well, that is history today. We've seen 2 women emerge in the United Kingdom as prime ministers. We have a female chancellor in Germany. And I believe it's about time in the United States that we saw a woman emerge. It's about time for a woman to emerge. And if the demographics, politically speaking, are anything to go by, Clinton is already 50-50 a president in the United States. Unlike other institutions, the American presidency is one in which the color and the gender ideacy of the occupant will be subsumed by the institution. It will stand uppermost rather than the individual. So the criticism against her as being weak or not being strong enough, not being able to command the troops, will be subsumed in the tradition that they already have. And I believe that as a country, they will rally around their president. America is a country that does not take insults to the person of their president very kindly. So whether it is male or female, the United States president will be accorded the respect deserving of the position.
Okay, Ambassador, on that note, I'd like to say special thanks to you. That's Ambassador Bulus Lolo, the former Permanent Secretary, Federal Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We thank you for your time. We know that you have other engagements and we'll have to excuse you at this point. Well, this is Good Morning Nigeria, looking at U.S. presidential elections and how it affects Africa and Nigeria particularly. We'll be back in a moment.
Introducing the new look of refreshment. The new, happier, friendlier packs of Happy Hour by Chivita. Packed with bold bursts of fun and refreshment. Happy Hour by Chivita. Happier bursts of refreshment. Introducing the new look of refreshment. The new, happier, friendlier packs of Happy Hour by Chivita. Packed with bold bursts of fun and refreshment. Happy Hour by Chivita. Happier bursts of refreshment.
Who are you, and what is your predicament?
Please, I'm looking for Candy, who is living here, in this compound.
Oh no, this is a premises. The compound is an amalgam of chemicals, and there is no Candy living in this premises.
This week on your award-winning comedy series, Professor John Bull, starring Kanayo Okanayo, Mercy Johnson, Queen Mokoye, Funky Malam, Bimbo Akintola, Ime Bishop, Yomi Fash Lanso, MC for God.
Who was you? What was you found?
Auntie, I look at you. I'm going to look for my sister.
I know you are poor. You was found the place. Call me. Okay?
So somebody.
She's definitely not my sister.
Shut up!
This Tuesday and Friday, 8:30 to 9 p.m. on NTN Network, International, and Star Times. It's absolutely bombastic.
Over and out. The largest data network, Glow, grandmasters of data.
Goodness is getting better. Introducing new exciting packs from Hollandia Yogurt. Goodness just got better. Hollandia Yogurt. It's all good.
From the House of Chi.
Goodness is getting better. Introducing new exciting packs from Hollandia Yogurt. Goodness just got better. Hollandia Yogurt. It's all good.
From the House of Chi.
Afrima. My name is Kenya Nicola Kikuti. I'm going to be at the Afrima Village on the 4th of November 2016. It's going to be great. It's going to be awesome. Make sure you are there.
This is unstoppable. Over 30 African stars and our Afrima nominees will be performing live. Urban Platinum, Kiss Daniel, Yewale Ayuba, Ikanzu, DVIP, Niniola, Ramide, Ngula, Small Doctor, H-Name, and other 30 African stars. On Friday, November 4th, 2016, come and enjoy original African underground sound at the Afrima Music Village at the Waterfront Bar Beach, Victoria Island, Lagos, Nigeria from 5 p.m. Entry fee is simply Afrima T-shirt available on ariatickets.com or at the venue. Afrima is an initiative of the African Union Commission and is brought to you by Lagos State Government with support from One Campaign, Access Bank, ERM Africa, and the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture. Africa will be unstoppable. Afrima, for hope, for celebration.
Well, this is still Good Morning Nigeria, where focus centers on U.S. presidential elections and how it affects Africa and Nigeria in particular. And we are being joined right now by former Permanent Secretary, Federal Minister Keshi. It's our pleasure to have you.
Thank you. Good morning.
I know you follow the talking points all this while, looking at the issues, that is dominating the U.S. presidential campaign, from defense to economy, and the play-up of races and all that. Looking at what is panning out, few days to the election, what is your take?
Let me begin by saying that I heard a few things that my former colleague, Ambassador Lolo, said. Number one, about the character of Donald Trump. As things are today, that longer makes no difference to a number of Republican voters who are returning back to the base. And this is why Trump is doing so well in terms of, closing the gap. He also mentioned about the likelihood of what could become the Trump African policy, if there'll be one or none at all. My take is that there'll be one. I know we are all emotionally involved, not only with Hillary, but with the Democrats. But history also teaches us that Republicans, when they take office, when they are running for office, show no interest in Africa. But when they get to office, the U.S. system is such that there are standard policies and regions where to focus, and circumstances and events invariably makes them begin to focus on Africa. So I expect that if Trump wins, there'll be a Trump African policy. If we don't know the shape, but given the American system as it is, there'll definitely be a Trump foreign policy. But in regards to what's going on now, 3 things have happened in the last couple of days. The Obama administration has given Trump a lifeline. Number one, they came up with a report about the Obama health care, which shows that prices are rising, and this is what America about the Obamacare, irrespective of the fact that it has given insurance to 21 million Americans. And for me, this is going to prove very difficult for the Republicans to repeal, because what do you do denying 21 Americans insurance care after the election? The second point is the email thing, which everybody has described as unprecedented. But what we need to know in Nigeria, what we need to see, is not just how these things are playing out in the American political system, but the fact that the institutions are strong and independent. The president is not intervening. The minister or the secretary of state for justice is not calling to question the decision of the FBI director. Everybody believes it was a bad, or it is a bad decision. I think so, coming so close to an election that is so controversial. He should have waited till, and the most annoying thing about it all is that the letter to the Senate did not indicate whether there was anything in the, in the email. And for me, the most critical thing, I think the Clinton has also made some critical mistake. In the last couple of days, rather than do the best they can to keep the focus on Trump, they started winding down, trying to land softly, in a sense to say that, look, if you are cruising home, you just have to take it easy. But if you're a sportsman, you know very well that the last few minutes, if you are doing 100 yards, is the most critical minute, except, of course, if you are Bolt, who normally slows down when he's getting to the tape. If you're a footballer, you know, as Ishola Folonshaw would say, in a football match, even 2 seconds to the end of the match, anything can still happen. I just think that the Clinton team, so confident of victory, took their eyes off the ball, and now they are just trying to return back to getting back on Donald Trump. Our best hope, because we all want Hillary to, for obvious reasons, but we sincerely hope. But here's the deal. If the polls continue as they are, never mind the ABC late last night tracking poll are not usually reliable, but the poll of polls is more reliable. And we should also not put so much faith on the poll of polls. We should look at the polls at the critical battleground states. And Clinton has a better path today. Donald Trump has to win 2 or 3. Right now, he's probably not, winning in 2 of those states. And that's the only hope Clinton has for now. And the last thing I'll say, there's a professor who in the last 25 years have always predicted correctly the election. From day one, this guy predicted that Donald Trump would win. Last week, he came back again to say the fundamentals of his prediction has not changed, and that's most unsettling.
But then Moody too has also been able to predict the elections correctly for the last 20 years. Moody polls. They've also been able to, of course, give predictions in the last 20 years, and they have been accurate, always accurate.
Again, I go back to football, of which I'm not just an ex-player and a great fan of the sports. You also know that there was once we had an octopus.
Octopus.
You know, who predicted so many games and at some point lost one.
Well, okay. Well, other Nigerians have been joining us on this very conversation. We don't forget the fact that we still have Professor Chudu Wazirike and Dr. Ewa in United States. We'll come back to you. Let's share the views of Nigerians who joined us via NTA Twitter handle, NTA GMN. And I have here from Tudu Wada, Ibrahim Tudu. Scandals, hate speeches, and lies are evident in U.S. democracy. American democracy is getting messy and bad example for the rest of the world.
Ibrahim Tudu also tweets, "It's the first time we hear the word rigging in the U.S. election. Is Trump wailing, or are we seeing the worst of democracy in 2016 U.S. election?"
Oluyide Adedayo says, African and Arab world are at the crossroads because both candidates are not trustworthy to police the world in the next 4 years.
Jami Usadawa says, fair enough, unlike what is obtainable in other democracies, Africa, no bloodshed, but constructive criticism and well-planned debates.
And Bashir Abubakar writes, very interesting sessions of campaigns and debates, no harassment, no violence, but only the country, U.S. of America, in their heart.
And this one tweets, it says, campaign patterns should teach Africa lessons that, yes, you can criticize constructively, but not thuggery, neither killing. And
Sani Michael Omakoji says, while Donald Trump looks like a write-off experiment before now, the relaunch of Mrs. Clinton's email scandal raises anxiety.
And this one is from Chibuzo Jonathan. He says the FBI director should even be more careful on how he releases vital information on a vital investigation because it's a few days to the election.
And from Nigeria, Hillary Clinton, who say, for Trump to open his vocal cavity and make some nasty comments against Nigeria, he is a failure. Well, gentlemen, you've heard the comments of Nigerians and relating to some of the issues. Let's start with Professor Wazirike. You've been listening in all this while. What is your take?
Well, you know,
especially as it concerns Nigeria and the comments.
Yes, you know, especially very, very, very revealing, quite a number of them. I think the one that catches my interest is the lessons we can take away from the American election, the process. In other words, somebody's mentioning that there's no violence, people can criticize even loudly, but without violence. It's very important to understand that the American electoral contest tends to be very energetic, tends to be very brusque. Sometimes it could be loud, it could be insolent and so on. They fight very hard until the last minute. I will simply caution everyone that this is a very unusual election because we've not really had a candidate like Donald Trump, you know, who really has no experience, has never even run for any office before. In fact, if he gets elected, not only will he be the oldest at 70, but also he'll be the one who has never had any governmental experience. Not that it really matters because the Constitution simply says anybody can run for president. And, as a successful businessman, maybe that qualifies him. But there's no question that the nuances of election, the civility that sometimes is called for, he's really, he's not used to this. He's really, this is a Brooklyn street fight, something I'm very familiar with. In other words, you knock your opponent, you knock them down. The way he addresses women is not the way women should be addressed, for instance. The way he behaves generally. It reminds you so much of the Hitlerite, fascist, hand-pumping. Part of it is that Donald Trump, in a way, got embroiled with that 34% non-college educated whites in particular. So you have to break this down by when we say Americans. America comes in, it's a rainbow coalition. There are men, there are women, obviously, but racial bloc voting is part of life. Voting by educational levels and so on and so forth. So when the young man is mentioning the way this has panned out and somehow there's been no fighting, I think it's a lesson that we need to learn because at the end of the process, on November 9, somebody will pick up the phone and do what one Nigerian famously did, which was Jonathan, pick up the phone and congratulate the winner. That is what is expected. But Donald is also saying that he'll break with that tradition. If he wins, it's wonderful. There's been no issue. But if he loses, he doesn't know what he will do. He may not even accept the result.
He said he will keep Americans in suspense on what
he will keep Americans in suspense. This is all very unusual, you know, but as Ambassador was saying, it doesn't really matter in the end. The institutions are so strong that he will find that whole process taken away from him. He will not be able to do half of all these things he's saying.
All right, Professor Wazirike will thank you there. Let's get to America, Rhoda, where Dr. Ewa is there. We want to feel the pulse of Americans the way it is currently, because we have few days to this election, and we're talking about how Americans are responding to development in Nigeria and Africa, following how these election campaigns have run over time.
Thank you very much for your question. I think for those of us who are greatly involved in this process, it's an education that needs to be taken cognizance of relative to the political dynamics in our country. I have seen a lot of Nigerians all over the country participating, discussing issues. Even when we go out to eat in our small confines, we criticize one another objectively, but we don't fight. We believe that if there is compromise in anything that we do as politicians or educators or whatever, there's always an avenue for us to get things done. We are mobilizing Nigerians from Chicago to Ohio to Washington, D.C., and so on and so forth. Some of them, very few, are Republicans, and a majority are Democrats. We meet and talk. What I think we also need to do in our own beloved country, Nigeria, is to get folks involved and also educate them that politics does not mean a winner takes all. That is not what happens in the United States. We provide avenues, even if we win or lose. We come together and look at the national interests of the country and use that as a criteria for development. And I think this is what is happening. Now, look at the United States today. In the next 20 years, the demographics are going to change. Minorities are going to be majority. And this is why you see a lot of all of the KKK and the white supremacist organizations are trying to hold on to what they have, which means it's a survival of the fittest right now. But in our own country, I hope and believe that we are learning something from this nation. That is, it is not always the case that you agree with somebody or disagree with somebody and use that as a criteria for hatred. I think we should learn from this. I believe Nigeria is capable of being the greatest nation on earth, if and only if we are able to utilize the national interest for development rather than for selfish interest. That's what we are learning from the United States.
Okay, on that note, I'd like to say special thanks to Dr. Ewa from the United States joining us on this very conversation. Is the chairman, African Political Action Committee, APAC, in the United States, and Chief Financial Officer in the state of Illinois. It's been our pleasure having you join us, giving us the perspective from the United States. At least we know what is obtaining there and know how Nigerians could, key in. Thank you for your advice. We hope you join us again anytime we reach out to you.
Thank you. God bless you all.
All right, thank you very much. But then finally, Ambassador Joe Keshi, you've listened to what Prof said in the U.S. He said that Nigeria has the potential to become one of the greatest countries in the world. Of course, we've seen lots of hate speeches. We've seen, so many things we've never seen in the presidential elections in the U.S. We've always seen them as a model. What are some of the positive things from your perspective you think we can take away from this election as Nigerians?
Oh, there are a lot of things we can take away from the election. Number one is the internal democracy of the political parties. In other words, the parties are allowed to choose their candidates with or no interferences from anybody. It's probably not too clearly understood in this country that in terms of the primaries, it is the responsibility of the parties and the states that run the primaries, and there are clearly defined rules. In contrast, you know very well that in this country, you can actually win in a primaries, as we've seen in Ondo, and INEC or another superpower will simply annul that candidate and select the candidate it wants. So you can see nobody questions at the end of the day a candidate of a major political party that has emerged through the political process. The second thing I think we need to learn from, we may want to borrow, is to convince our leaders that it also helps them to engage in a debate. That debate does a couple of things. Number one, it helps the public to understand, to see, number one, to understand very clearly the policies you are enunciating, and for them to decide whether they want to go with that policy or they don't want to go with that policy. And when we begin to do those things, we probably reduce the level of violence that we see in our political, political system. The second one also, we see that the institutions, in spite of everything, whether you're a democratic government, in the White House, the institutions are allowed to function irrespective of who is in the White House. So there is nothing wrong for the Department of Health to release, for example, the report on the health situation vis-a-vis Obamacare. There's probably nothing wrong except the timing. That's a quarrel. Except the timing that the the FBI director, released made this statement. So again, we could say that the institutions of states have been so built to be strong and independent and to operate in a way that makes the whole nation strong. But where you have various interferences at any given time, it weakens institutions. And if our institutions are not strong in this country, it is because of consistent and sometimes unnecessary interference by the powers that be. So these are some of the what we can take away from the elections. And of course, we the people, we just must see this as a game. Again, go back to maybe in this case, football is not a good example because we do fight. We do fight on football fields, But the point is that, look at it could reduce the level of violence if we all understand the issues, that are at stake. And the final point I want to make, when you look at the candidates in all, both at the gubernatorial level and the Senate and the Congress, you need to look at the caliber of people running for office. None of them today in the United States is jobless. So when people lose election, they go back to their work. In this country, half of those running for election are jobless. So they see politics as an industry. As a business. Where for them it's a question of do or die. And you actually have to look at the characters of the people we have in our National Assembly, houses, and so on. And you begin to wonder whether whether we will not do better if we can change some of those personalities.
Okay. Professor, we thank you. We're coming to you now, Professor Wazirike. Jokeshi, you're always on top of your game, and you've marshaled these points, and I hope we'll be able to take it in, Nigerians, politicians, and the political elite. My interest is in the area of internal democracy, how it plays out, the issue of institutions, and primarily the media, the role the media plays in drawing attention to what is said, investigative journalism to that extent. What do you think we need to do going forward to enjoy this independence, this democracy in its true sense, without the powers that be or the owners of the various medium influencing actions or inactions of reportage?
Yes, extremely important. I think one of the lessons we can take away really is the whole question of ideological clarity. You must stand for something. Your ideological leaning, not in the old sense of East versus West, communism versus capital, that's not what the issue. In other words, your philosophy of nationhood. For instance, somebody mentioned, I think Dr. Ewa, on the primacy of the American national interest. Whether you're Democrat or whether you're Republican, America is number one, America in the consciousness. Now, coming to the reality of what the fourth estate in the realm, which is the journalistic a state can do. There is no question that in terms of the social responsibility proclivity of the media and in terms of the agenda-setting proclivity of the media is extremely important in any democracy. That's why it's informally called the fourth estate. You have three estates, obviously, the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. There's a fourth one that aggregates the opinions and the interests of the people and places it in the debating halls. I think that the reality is that journalism and the media generally would need self-regulation and already does self-regulate. But there's no question that it's a very expensive enterprise and the governments are still very big players. But I'm encouraged by the fact that, especially in the very important broadcast TV, radio realm, it's now been privatized. There are alternative voices, and that is very good for Nigeria. I understand that very clearly Nigeria is an evolving democracy. We're looking at the democracy in America that has been around for over 230 years, and gone through some of these issues. I think that the greatest lesson we ought to take from what we're watching is simply that longevity and experience in democratic cycles of election is very important. We've really only been stable democratically in this country since 1999. That's not a very long period, as it were, but I think that Nigeria is moving. If we can sustain it on a cycle of 20 years, 30 years, even 100 years, then we probably will be getting there. So part of it is that so long as we internalize democracy as part of the process, it will eventually work out. That's what I would say.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Chude Wazirike. He is a former member, House of Representatives, and of course, we're pleased to have you join us on Good Morning Nigeria today.
Thank you.
And I also want to thank Ambassador Joe Keshi, your former permanent secretary, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We thank you for sharing your time and thoughts with us this morning.
Thank you.
We won't let them go until we share these tweets from Nigerians, because Nigerians joined us in this conversation. Just from Nuhu Abdul, he says that America would have saved itself from that Trump guy. I wonder what that means.
Chika Ogu says, I'm optimistic that the winner would emerge in the U.S. election will be based on the people's choice and merit.
And Jamil Sadara says, this is a new dawn. U.S. need to get it right. A pseudo-anti-capitalist Trump and socialist Hillary. To me, both are capitalists in disguise.
Ibeme Dominic says, it's better for mankind and Africans for Clinton to emerge. Trump has much in common with Hitler. Nigerians should see that.
And Mike Anyakwo says, I am at loss that their campaigns are not based on issues, but on character assassinations. Should we learn from that?
And
no.
This one says, E.K. Victor wrote to me, he says, whosoever told real Donald Trump that he could win the election did a really great job of brainwashing him. Thank you very much. Well, those are the tweets that Republicans said. Well, I just want to let you know that there are other candidates in this election. We have the Libertarian Party, and of course the Green Party. Two other candidates also in this election. But then,
but I'm receiving mention. Well, I'd not like to say special thanks.
Their votes don't count. Their votes don't count. So let's not waste our time.
Ambassador Joe Keshi will say special thanks to you. And of course, Professor Chude Wazirike, we thank you all for making our time to be part of this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, brother.
And from there, we talk sports and Super Falcons intensify preparation